That's what she is. She's also not really anything else, so.
Yeah, and so that really played into the game of the Republic. I was hoping that the Democrats would
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі!
Слава, слава, слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть, смерть, смерть!
Good afternoon, my friends, and welcome to another round of our Ukrainian events, where we tell the world what's going on in Ukraine and how it can all stop this war once and for all. But before we go any further, we're going to start, as we always do, with the Ukrainian anthem.
Ще не вмерла України, ні слава, ні воля. Ще нам, браття українці, усміхнеться доля. Згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. Що, браття козацького роду, душу тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. І покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна! Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
But my friends, there's no point chasing around the bush, going around this topic. Donald Trump is now President of the United States of America. That's a fact. Now, we have to face this fact head on. Is this going to be a good thing, a bad thing? Are things going to remain the same? No one knows. No one can say for certain. We can make extrapolations, assumptions, based on what Trump and his opposition and his followers have been saying lately. So we can make an educated guess on what's going to happen next. However, my friends, whatever happens next, we need to make sure to show the world that there are correct and incorrect choices in this situation. It's not all the same. It's not like what the Russian terrorist regime likes to say, oh, all politics are the same, all politicians are the same. It's nothing like that. It's a huge difference between the many different options that the United States have now in front of them. Now the good news is, now that the election is done, the candidates, or rather the president now, no longer has to be fearful of the repercussions, of the immediate repercussions of his actions. So he can do things that might be slightly less popular, but actually better in the long term. This is good. That's exactly why, my friends, the United States have been a bit reticent in extending more aid for Ukraine before the election. They were afraid of acting very openly, very directly towards Russia, because both the candidates were afraid that that was going to hurt their personal perspective in winning. But now, that problem is no longer here. Now, you all know, my friends, that me personally, I used to have a little bit of a skeptical opinion of Trump. Still do, to a large extent. Some of us are Trump supporters, some of us are supporters of the Democrats, of Kamala Harris. Most of us are kind of neutral to the whole situation, my friends. That's a fact. However, I sincerely hope that I was wrong in the assumptions I have made about Trump, and I sincerely hope that the Russian terrorist regime's propaganda machine is also wrong in celebrating his victory. Now, That's the interesting part about all of this. Because the Russian propaganda does not lie. Or rather, it does lie, obviously. But what they're trying to push is always what's going to be worse for the West long term. Of course, they can sometimes pull off some reverse psychology kind of stuff. However, it is obvious that Putin would much rather play his hand with a bit of a wild card like Trump. Now, Trump could be beneficial, or it could be something terrible. It all depends on his decisions, and the decisions of his authority now, of his group of people who are now in power. Now, the main person I personally used to have a grievance with, and still do, is not even Trump, it's J.D. Vance, because of the rhetoric he's been having in terms of Ukraine. Trump hasn't really said anything bad, per se, but his rhetoric has always been very open to interpretation. We're going to stop the war. We're going to end this war. Now, let's see if that was because he did not want to show his real plans to the Russians, or because he planned to throw Ukraine on the bus in the first place. We remind you all, my friends, every person who can hear us, every person who can see us, every person who can perceive our message, we remind you all that it is far cheaper to support your allies and make sure they win against your enemies than to allow your allies to be butchered and then face a far stronger enemy yourself. It's far cheaper, far less bloody, and simply better. Prevention is the best kind of cure, as they say. And to prevent the Russian terrorist regime from starting a full-scale war against NATO is the best kind of cure against such a situation like this. It's a fact. Now, once again, we remind you all that every single life of a Ukrainian saved today is the life of a Westerner saved tomorrow. The life of a person who lives and contributes to the free world. That is what helping Ukraine means. Of course, the people who support the opposite side, the Russophiles, the shills, the apologists, they will scream and shout, oh, but you know that costs money. Once again, my friends, what's easier? The United States and for NATO and for Europe as a whole to be helping Ukraine now and to throw a few more pieces of equipment to the Ukrainians so they can use them properly and allow them to use them properly, most of all. Or to allow Russia to occupy Ukraine, to butcher most of its population, and then to take what's left and use it against the West in a future war. What's the better option, my friends? I'm pretty sure everybody can see it. It's obviously helping Ukraine win now, rather than facing a stronger Russia in the future. But this decision does not all end there. There are far more ramifications to this. One of the main ramifications is this perpetual threat of nuclear war. My friends, make no mistake, if Russia wins this war, it will be proven to the rest of the world that the only way to make sure you have security is to own nuclear weapons. That is going to be proven by a Russian victory. We must not allow that to happen. Ukraine has sacrificed much by giving up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. Now, it's up to every single person in the free world to give back to the Ukrainians what they have sacrificed. Not in terms of giving them nuclear weapons, although that should not be off the table, but to give enough aid for Ukraine, to make sure that Russia sustains a decisive defeat in this war. That is what we should all strive for. Not saving a few coins in the short term, a couple of dollars here, a couple of dollars there, no. But to save lives in the future, to provide security for the free world in the future, to provide that better future. My friends, it's necessary to help Ukraine today for that future to ever come to pass. Once again, if Russia gets its dirty hands on all the rich Ukrainian resources, on the Ukrainian population, on the Ukrainian lands, and then decides to attack further into Europe. I'm sorry, but then the free world will face an enemy many times stronger than they're facing right now as we speak. That is the gravity of this situation. That is what we have to deal with. That's what Trump is going to have to deal with now. Now, once again, let's see if he does the right decision, if he makes that right decision, or he's going to follow the voices of appeasement, the Russophiles, the Viktor Orbans of this world, the Tucker Carlsons of this world, the Marjorie Taylor Greens of this world. Let's see if that's going to be his choice. It's impossible to say for certain. You know, some of my friends, they think that Trump is going to be a good thing for Ukraine. They believe his promises of ending the war quickly. Personally, I find it difficult to see a quick end for this war. This war has lasted for a very long time. And now, we need to start implementing the real legislations that are going to put pressure on Russia. We need to make sure that Ukraine gets all the aid necessary. We need to make sure that Russia gets sanctioned to the utmost level. And you know, that's a funny part about the Russian propaganda. To the Westerners, openly, to the people, they always say, oh, the Russians aren't hurting us. Oh, that West, they're hurting themselves with their own sanctions, right? Well, it just so happens that every single time there's negotiations in Russia, one of their main demands is the lifting of sanctions. If those sanctions were not painful for them, why keep asking to lead them? Why keep asking to lift those sanctions? It makes no sense. Of course it makes no sense. The Russian terrorist regime makes no sense at all. And that's why it's so difficult for some Westerns to wrap their head around the way that Russia functions. Here's a plot twist for you. It doesn't function. The only thing that makes Russia a whole is fear. The leaders, the oligarchs, they're afraid of the system. And the system is afraid of the oligarchs. The oligarchs are afraid they're going to be taken to a dark room and tortured to death after watching their wife and children being killed. And the system is afraid that the oligarch is going to betray the oh-so-corrupt Russia and sell it over to the West. That's the interesting relationship of power within Russia. But of course, people who live in the West, they don't see this. They can't see clearly what's going on in Russia. For them, it's all a mystery. Don't remember very well who said it, that Russia is a mystery within another mystery or something like that. Perhaps some of the English speakers here will tell me that one later. But still, the truth of the matter is, my friends, Russia is in pain because of the sanctions. Russia is fearful of retaliation from the West in case they use nuclear weapons. That's exactly why they can't escalate too much immediately. That's exactly why they cannot use nuclear weapons as we speak right now. But every single day that this war goes on, that risk increases. Russia becomes more brazen. Russia becomes readier to escalate more and more. This addition of North Korean troops in the Russian military, so in the beginning, this addition, my friends, is a huge escalation. This is the first time that any of the sides in this war have employed literal troops of another country. Not just mercenaries, not just foreign nationals, but actual troops of a different country. This is now a 2v1. North Korea is helping Russia against Ukraine. Ukraine is now fighting two nuclear states. After being the third biggest nuclear power in the world and giving it all up for world peace. This is the situation Ukraine finds itself in now. The world needs to wake up at long last. And Ukraine needs to be provided with what it needs to achieve that victory. that could have been achieved long ago. However, alas, the voices of appeasement continue to be heard. The Russophiles and the shills and the liars continue to speak to the people, try to scare them off. Unfortunately, but alas, my friends, we need to keep moving forward so that this war ends for good. The only way it's truly going to end is with a crushing defeat for the Russian terrorist regime. Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
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 Fight the jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
Long-range missiles 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 for Ukraine.
Let Ukraine strike back.
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 You know, my friends, we should not trust every source that we hear. However, we should trust the sources that are being proven trustworthy. Personally, I find very trustworthy. A few days ago, I watched a very interesting video of Elvira Nabiullina, the head of Russian finances, the person who has kept the Russian economy afloat, you could say. Perhaps you could say she is one of our main enemies. However, that's a difficult thing to say, considering that at the beginning of this quote-unquote special military operation, Elvira Nabiullina tried to immediately resign. She saw the writing on the wall. She did not want to be held accountable for the complete and utter collapse of the Russian economy. She did not want to be held responsible for the great collapse. She was seeing that it was coming for sure. However, Putin has personally rejected her resignation and in fact sanctioned her and prevented her from filing in for resignation anytime in the future. You could say she is now chained to her position of power. You could say that she is now forced to keep the Russian economy afloat. You could perhaps even say that her life literally depends on it. So it is difficult not to pity the poor woman, but at the same time she is one of the main contributors for our enemy, the Russian terrorist regime. And what she said was truly interesting. She said that a future stagflation in Russia is all but inevitable. And the only thing that might fix it, in a way, if fix is even the right word, is a huge recession of the Russian economy. Now what is stagflation? I wish our friend Thomas, the economist, was here. He could explain this better than I could. However, I'll try my best based on the information that is readily available to all of us, my friends. Stagflation means that both the demand and the offer diminishes. There is inflation, and there's also a reducing of production. What results from that is a complete and utter recession of the economy. A cannibalization of the economy, you could say, which, to an extent, has been already happening in Russia for a while now. Now, the Union said something very interesting. She said that all the measures that have been implemented up until now will have a limit to their effectiveness. That they will not be able to fix their huge stagflation that's incoming merely by controlling their economy. It's not going to work. It would seem like Russia has but a couple of years left, and we know that this has been said many times in the past. And yet Russia finds a way to persist because of the many corrupt people in the free world who sell their own freedom, who sell their own values for a couple of extra rubles that might, by the way, become completely worthless in a year or two. My friends, the facts are very obvious. Russia is going to lose at the end. But the question is Russia going to do the damage it wants to do against the world? Even if Russia loses this war, if it wins in Ukraine, millions of people will die. But I'm sure many people who live their own lives and care for themselves only will not care about that. It's fine. There's another caveat to that. Not only the Ukrainians will suffer. If the Russian terrorist regime wins, what's going to happen next? The precedent of nuclear weapons being the only thing that prevents you from being invaded, abused, violated by your enemies, is going to be the only truth on this earth. Dozens of countries will try their absolute best to scramble up some money to buy nuclear weapons, to start a nuclear program, because it will be proven that nuclear weapons are the only deterrent against foreign invasion. And what will happen then? You see, Obama has a very funny quote. That's how he described the Indians and the Pakistanis in their relation between India and Pakistan. Obviously, it's a very rocky relationship. He called those two countries cooks with nukes. Crazy people with nukes. Why might that be? Because they kept threatening each other with nuclear war every single time something did not go their way. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Of course. It's the same exact thing Putin is doing. But except, when India and Pakistan were doing it to each other, Russia does it to all of the world. It holds the whole world at ransom. Simply because they have those nuclear weapons. Appeasement, my friends, is never going to work against that. It should have been proven many times in the past. Appeasement will only make them likelier to use those nuclear weapons because they will feel like they can get away with it. The only thing that stops the Russian terrorist regime from starting to use nuclear weapons is fear. Fear of retaliation from the West. That's the only thing that's stopping them. You find it funny, my friend? Have a lovely day. However, if I may interest you in something, you might notice that Russia has never invaded a NATO country before. They have only invaded non-NATO countries. Why might that be? Russia has proven many times that they will only do the things they feel like they will get away with. The same goes for the nuclear weapons. Thank you very much, my friend. The same goes for the nuclear weapons, my friends. In fact, this fact is only multiplied when it comes to nuclear weapons. It's a taboo at the moment to use them. However, Russia has crossed many taboos already in this war that they have started, that they have escalated, and in which they have committed countless war crimes and crimes against humanity, genocide, and of course, ecocide. We need to remember this, my friends. One of the ways, by the way, that Russia avoids sanctions by the West is the so-called shadow fleet. What is this shadow fleet that people keep talking about? It's very simple. Russia has gotten their filthy hands on a few very low-quality tankers. which don't have any assurance. Insurance, in fact, excuse me. Insurance is the way that the West was putting pressure on the Russian oil sales. However, with these not insured tankers, Russia can get away with murder, literally. But what's the risk of this little trick they pull on the whole world? The risk is, my friends, if one of those tankers sinks, then it's just going to be an absolutely huge ecological catastrophe. But of course, Russia does not care. Russia never cared. Ecological catastrophe, that's not their problem. Their only purpose is to kill the people who oppose them. And if more people die because of ecological catastrophe that they have caused, all the better. That's exactly what they want to achieve. To kill as many as possible. To destroy the lives of as many as possible. They were discussing a possible famine in Africa and Middle East, where some of the countries that are buying and receiving most of the Ukrainian grain are. And you know what they said about famines in those places? They said, good. They said, let them starve to that. And then the West is going to crawl to us on their knees and ask to be friends again. That, my friends, is what the Russian terrorist regime is saying. And this is no secret. This is easily visible on their propaganda channels. Of course, the Russians have a very big distinction between the propaganda channels in the West and the propaganda channels they show to their own people. Huge difference. Sometimes they say the polar opposite things. But why is it that people don't see this? It's because, my friends, people don't care. People live their own small lives, and they hope those small lives are going to continue forever into eternity. They hope that nothing will ever touch them. That these problems in Ukraine or elsewhere will never appease them. Will never appease the situation that's going on right now, my friends. Perhaps appease is the wrong word to use. It will never influence them. That's what they think. But my friends, truth of the matter is, this world is global. It's not local anymore. This country depends on many other countries in the world. It depends on its relations with those countries. And to discard those relations and choose an isolation stance is suicidal. This is well known. However, it should be better known still. Because some people love isolationism. They think it's basic. They think it's cool. They think it's awesome. Oh yeah, all the best for our people and screw all the rest. That's not exactly how the world works, unfortunately, my friends. We cannot simply wish to go back to the Middle Ages and segregate ourselves from the rest of the world. Look at North Korea. Look where isolation has brought them. Now they fully depend on Russia, on preventing their own people from starving to death. What an interesting relationship that is. However, don't be mistaken if you're thinking that there's some kind of love between the Russians and the North Koreans. It's purely a benefactor relationship between the two countries. You see, there's been already many instances, not only of North Koreans dying in Ukraine, but also of them shooting Russian troops themselves. Who would have thought that the most isolated population in the whole world cannot quite tell the difference between the white people of two different countries? Who would have thought that they don't see any difference between every person in the rest of the world? Unless, of course, they are Koreans like themselves. Who would have thought that the livelihood of ignorance and isolation would have resulted in ignorant and isolated people? Truly, no surprises here, my friends. However, what's surprising is to still see those voices of appeasement. What's surprising is to hear Viktor Orban and his likes immediately say, oh, we need to change our policy in terms of dealing with Ukraine. What an interesting statement. You know, if I did not know what he truly means by that, I would agree with him. I would say, yes, it's time to change the policy. It's time to finally aim for victory, and not just for mere survival. It's time to finally be aiming to destroy your enemies who are coming to destroy you, instead of simply aiming to survive another day, to live and let live. It does not work, my friends. That does not... Excuse me, do you want to say something, friend? Alas, I can't hear you anymore. Perhaps you should have stopped to say a few words here. Speak a few words. I love the people who sometimes hack Alas. It's very nice. Those people, they support us. However, sometimes we get these interesting characters who come by us and shout something of the sort of "Slava России." It's very interesting, truly. To which I love to ask them, why? Why glory to Russia? Why Slava России? Why? We ask this to some of the Russians who voted for Putin in the last Russian quote-unquote election. It was obviously rigged, but still, they did do their little circus all over the world. And they could not answer, they simply could not come with one reason why they want to support Putin, why they want Putin to win. They did not know. That, my friends, is what happens when you have zero reason behind your choices and 100% emotion behind them. That's what happens when you are being used and abused by the propaganda of others. Your emotions will be strung upon by those words of the propagandists, and they will be used against you. So we need to be careful with that. We need to be very careful with that, my friends, indeed. Very careful indeed. But my friends, it also needs to be said that there has been real damage done against the Russian terrorist regime. Just great news. Every little bit of damage against our common enemy counts. And it makes life easier for the future generations of this world. It makes life better for them. I saw a little video by a Polish speaker of one of their think tanks who discussed the future relations with Russia and how to end this war. He said it very accurately. There is one best case scenario, the complete collapse of modern day Russia. That is what we should all be aiming for. Not to keep a few brownie points with the corrupt Russian regime so in the future we can get some relations with them. No! Their regime needs to collapse. They need to give back the territories they have stolen, not only from the Ukrainians, but also from the Finnish, from the Japanese, and from many other people around the world. Karelia needs to be given back to Finland. The Kuril Islands need to be given back to Japan. And even China wants parts of Russia for themselves. You see, they want what they used to have in the past. However, my friends, it needs to be said also. Hello, how are you?
I'm very I live in Papa. In Papa. Я живу в Україні, я живу в Харкові. Це 40 кілометрів від цієї страшенної границі. Я йшла по цій вулиці і чула, що ви казали. Мене болить. Мене болить. Тому що ви знаєте, як ви поїхали. А нам болить, і нам болить. Харків! Харків.
Донбас вогні.
І ви знаєте, я вдячна вашій країні. І я бачу, як ви говорите, які душевні люди ви нас. Я дякую. Спасибі вам. Тому що ви Харків, тому що ви Україна. Дякую і пішла по вулиці далі.
Дякую, що сказали два слова. Важливо також розмовляти українською, щоб українці нас чули, щоб українці розуміли, що є підтримка за кордоном. Друзі, взагалі, це головна річ, що кожен українець за кордоном має робити. Якщо наші партнери з Заходу залишать нас, залишать цю війну, такою, якою вона є в цей момент, то ми ніколи цю війну не виграємо. Більше від 80% нашої зброї тепер приходить від наших партнерів. Друзі, по-іншому не можна. Треба усім, які можуть щось сказати, всьому світу говорити як можна більше. Тому що це справжня різниця між перемогою і поразкою, між життям і смертю. Якщо за Україну будуть знати люди за кордоном, то Україна виграє. Якщо за Україну забудуть заново, як забували так багато разів в минулому, то тоді життя нікому не буде. Ти теж хочеш щось сказати?
Я з Києва, я депутат Київської міської ради. Ми сьогодні відряджені, і ми сьогодні надзвичайно радіємо тому, що ми маємо підтримку від вас. Ми сьогодні йдемо по вулиці, на скрізь відрядження, і ми відчуваємо від вас підтримку. Я хочу, щоб люди в інших країнах, в інших містах приєднувалися і відчували те, що переживаємо ми. Ми розраховуємо на вашу підтримку, ми розраховуємо на те, що ви є, тому що нам надзвичайно славно, ми сильні, ми непереможні. Ми люди, які розуміємо, що за нашою спиною стоїть вся Європа. Підтримуйте нас, ми підтримуємо вас. Це надзвичайно важливо, щоб українці в усьому світі об'єднувалися. Надзвичайно важливо, щоб ми сьогодні підтримували Білорусію, яка стоїть сьогодні з прапором, національним прапором Білорусі. Ми боролися, боремося і будемо боротися далі. Сьогодні, йшовши по вулиці, 3 дні тому ми знаємо, що відбувалося в Харкові, що відбувається в Києві. Ми бачимо, що наші міста бомбардують, і що новітні технології, які використовує Росія, і ті новітні технології вони застосовуються до нашої країни, то ми просимо підтримки і Британії, ми просимо підтримки і Америки, і сьогоднішнього чи нового президента Америки, який, я вірю, що він підтримує демократію, авторитарний режим. Я вірю, що всі демократичні держави підтримують Україну. Друзі, люди, підтримайте нас, ми підтримуємо один одного, і я дякую, що ви сьогодні є. Тому що для нас надзвичайно важливо, що ви сьогодні. Слава Україні, слава Білорусі, слава Грузії, яка сьогодні теж переживає важкі часи. Давайте підтримувати демократію, давайте підтримувати один одного, і ми точно переможемо, тому що ми разом. Ми віримо у мирову цю атмосферу. Слава Україні! Слава, слава, слава нашим героям! І слава всім, хто нас підтримує. Дякую.
Дякую вам гарно. A round of applause, guys. A round of applause for our friends. Now, I'd like to just make a little quick translation. Obviously, I won't be able to translate every word, my friends. Sorry for that. However, I think it's important to translate the gist of it. What these two lovely ladies said. They said that they are from Ukraine. They said that what they have seen would shock anyone. And it does shock us. It does shock the people who can see it. They thanked us all for coming out here and for giving our support to Ukraine. Because that is the true difference between life and death for the Ukrainian people. It's the support abroad, my friends. The support abroad will decide whether this war will be won by the people fighting for their lives or by the creatures who gave up their humanity to kill, to rape, to pillage, and to annihilate others, simply because they decided as such. And my friends, it's also very important to remember that the rest of the world does not necessarily know about all the atrocities that the Russian terrorist regime has been committing. That is why we must speak. That is why we must tell people what's truly going on, so that they are able to make an informed decision based on the facts at hand. and avoid similar situations that might happen to themselves. Many times Russia has cheated and lied to the rest of the world. Many times has Russia gotten away with their crimes. And also something else these ladies said. Support to our friends in Georgia, in Belarus, in Moldova, in Kazakhstan, in all of these countries, there's a huge opposition movement against the Russian terrorist regime. And in all of these countries, to different levels, the Russian terrorist regime tries to subvert the government and to take over, to make puppets out of those people. In Belarus and in Kazakhstan in particular, they have invaded with tanks and brought down peaceful protests against the pro-Russian puppet governments they had there. A few days ago, Maya Sandu has become president of Moldova. These are very happy news. These are very good news, my friends. It means Moldova is now many steps closer to integration and not integration into barbarism with the Russian terrorist regime. This means that Moldova will be under threat. And if Ukraine loses, then Moldova will be invaded for certain. But what am I saying? Moldova has already been invaded. There are still Russian troops in Transnistria, an unrecognized area that only Russia recognizes, Russia and their closest allies, of course. My friends, it's time to wake up. It's time to see the situation as it is. It's time for us to stand united and finally stop the Russian terrorist regime and move on to a better future. Слава Украине!
Мариуполь мы вернем, а ты поедешь в Ростов жить.
Україна! Понад усе! Україна! Понад усе! Україна! Понад усе! Героям України тричі!
Слава, слава, слава!
Ворогам України тричі! Смерть! 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 And now, my friends, we will have a short musical break. Слава Україні!
Слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі! Слава! 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 Ворогам України тричі! Смерть! 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 You know, my friends, the coming of our friends today, these lovely two Ukrainian ladies, it's kind of reminded me of something very important that we need to talk about. We need to always mention the humanity of this war, the people who are actually suffering, the people who are getting shelled, the people who are getting rocketed, who are getting hit with the Russian rockets on their daily lives. Imagine, in your little department, your little apartment here in the United Kingdom, hearing the bangs and the booms of rockets hitting nearby buildings. You know, a few days ago we heard the petards coming off, you know, the fireworks. Some people got scared. You know, sometimes cats get scared, right? Animals get scared with that, too. But you know, imagine that was real. Imagine the rockets were real.
Краще вивчити поспілкуватися, ви так яскраво розказуєте все. А можна я представлюся? Я з Харкова. Ну, ви знаєте, гостя цією страшною країною, вона, ну, може, це елементи. Я знаю, що таке бомби, я знаю, що таке бомблять. Я знаю, що таке страшно. Люди, ви не знаєте тут, що таке страшно. Я не хочу, щоб ви знали. Дійсно, я не хочу, щоб ви знали, що таке війна. Це болить. Це страшно болить. І знаєте, ми сьогодні просто що по вулиці. Ми вас зустріли. І ви так сказали, так половинку. Ви душою боліте, ви проти війни. Ви любите проти війни.
Стоїмо вже майже 3 роки з першого дня війни.
Ви справжні, справжні.
Того, що ми
І знаєте, тими страшними враженнями ви не хочете дивитися. Хочете дивитися дружбою. Просто хочете взяти за руки, да.
Давайте з нами, обнімайте.
Так, як вони жили по вулиці, я зрозуміла, що я за руки з вами. Що мені хочете сказати? Мені хочеться
Що ми
сказати,
переможемо, так?
однозначно ми переможемо. А що ви мені хочете сказати? Я хочу вас, всіх людей, бачити щасливими. Я хочу бачити вас службами. Я хочу бачити, що ви, знаєте, працювали разом, щоб ви просто жили. Я дякую вам. Я сьогодні прийшла сюди. От йшла вулицю, я хочу просто сказати вам спасибі. От спасибі. Спасибі вам, що у нас в житті є такі люди. І ми чекаємо вас у Харкові!
Дякую вам. Дякую вам за ваше людство, за те, що попри емоції ви можете сказати кілька слів людям і сказати, що ви відчуваєте. Це надзвичайно важливо. Це дуже важливо, щоб люди бачили, що в іншому пункту події є справді люди, які живуть, також які мають свої сім'ї, які мають своїх коханих людей. Такі люди завжди є. Такі люди тепер страждають. Через те, що російський терористичний режим не був поставлений на своє місце давним-давно в минулому. За те, що люди в цьому світі повірили їм на слово. Коли вони сказали, а так, звісно, давайте українці, здавайте ядер, тоді нічого вам не зробимо. Потім почався шантаж з газом, з нафтою. Це був перший признак того, що вони ніколи не дотримують своє слово. Після цього була війна у Донбасі. Звісно, друзі, що вони на цьому би ніколи не зупинялись. Але ніхто не очікував, що вони нападуть на Україну так, як вони напали. В ніч. Без ніякої декларації війни, без нічого. Просто так взяли і почали нову війну. І навіть не назвали її війною. Я навіть не буду пробувати тут сказати по-російськи, я вже тут заплутався. Мої друзі тут знають, що я по-російськи дуже шкандибаю. Ми зате по-українськи вміємо говорити, це головне. Це найважливіше, друзі. But my friends, I'd like to translate a little bit for all the English speakers here, so that they know what's going on, so that they know what we're talking about. We've had a pretty heartful discussion here about the people who are suffering, the people who are real people, with real emotions, with real families, with real friends and family, who they love. And those people are suffering right now. I think this is a good moment, my friends. This is a good moment to pay our respects for those who have died, for those who have suffered, for those who continue to suffer. So I'd like to invite you all, in the name of all those people, in the name of these lovely ladies and many other people in Ukraine who are suffering right now, to do a minute of silence. Thank you. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
It's always good to see people come here and give some of their own mind for the rest of the world, to tell people how they feel, to tell people what they've been through. It's very important. Sometimes, with all the numbers and all the statistics, people forget that there are other people on the other side of this argument, that there are people suffering because of the Russian terrorist regime's desire for destruction, because of their desire for conquest, for their desire to enrich their elites. And that is what it all comes down to, my friends. This reality has been allowed to slip many times from the forked tongues of the Russian propagandists and of the many Russian war criminals. They've spoken about this openly because it's the reality. This war is being waged to enrich Putin, to enrich the Russian elites. It's not your average Russian who's going to get benefits. Your average Russian is going to be sent as meat into the battlefield. And it's the rich Russians who will receive the benefits out of that meat grinder. And in the West, my friends, people need to understand at long last that Russia is not an entity that can be negotiated with. Russia is not an entity that can be reasoned with. Russia is not an entity that can be allowed to exist. Russia is the enemy of this country and of every country in the free world. That, my friends, is reality. And we need to face it head on at long last. However, I think it's important to give some of those figures, to talk about the facts at hand on the battlefield. We all know that Russia has been advancing on many fronts. How can that be? With all the aid that Ukraine has received, well, my friends, that aid is nothing to write home about. In some regards, like in terms of drones, Ukraine sometimes even holds a small advantage, especially in the quality of those. In other regards, like for example tanks, Russia holds the advantage, but they can't use them properly because they're old, and of course, because the Ukrainians are good at taking them down. In other regards too, Ukraine holds other advantages. like in terms of the armored vehicles, that are being replenished to a good amount, thanks to France, Germany, UK, and US. Thanks for their aid. However, my friends, the main hurting point, the main issue right now is artillery. The Russian terrorist regime always focused its doctrine on its artillery. In some parts of the battlefield, the Russians have an advantage of 14-1 in terms of artillery pieces. 14-1. Those numbers are not synonymous to victory. Those numbers are not synonymous to survival, my friends. Those numbers need to change. Ukraine needs to get artillery pieces. Ukraine needs to get artillery shells to be able to fight back against the Russian terrorist regime on equal terms, at least. Of course, the Western equipment will always be better than the Russian equipment. But how can we allow the Russians to have the advantages in numbers of equipment? Well, it's the united economies of the free world that are facing off against them. You expect people to believe that the free world cannot get its act together and finally start producing more. All the united economies of the free world cannot outpace Russia. What a load of nonsense. My friends, it's time to stop lying to ourselves. Victory is in our grasp. It is the lack of will that's preventing that victory from being ours. It's the lack of will that's preventing the collapse of the Russian terrorist regime and finally a big move towards world peace. That should be the objective of everyone on this earth. That should be the objective of you guys, all of you, as it is ours. That's why we are here, my friends, to tell people how the situation can be brought to an end. How this war can be ended at long last. How peace can be restored. However, we need to remember that with entities like the Russian terrorist regime, the only peace possible is peace through strength, security through strength, future through strength, the ability to defend yourself against the Russian terrorist regime is of utmost importance. I remember very well when we spoke with the hypocritical Stop the War movement. Bunch of communists and socialists, really. Not very different from the far right that they claim to oppose. They do want complete control for the state. They do want isolation for this country. How interesting. Both groups completely on the side of Russia, both extremes. But it's not surprising at all, my friends. All the extremists, as one, will support Russia because Russia represents them. Russia represents extremism. And that is why we should all oppose them openly and vehemently. I remember very well when we spoke to them. And they were talking about the nuclear demilitarization of the United Kingdom. They were talking about defunding the British military. What an interesting point to give. You have a psychopathic regime that's expansionistic, that ignores all international agreements, invading a sovereign country, genociding a sovereign people. And then you got these geniuses scream and shout, we want peace! We're going to demilitarize now! What a bunch of idiotic nonsense. Of course, if you have a gun in your hands and a man is charging at you with a bloodied up knife, the first thing you do is throw the gun into the bushes, right? That's what you should be doing. No, my friends. That is not what you should be doing. That is not what anyone should be doing because that is suicide. To appease Russia is suicide. To demilitarize in the face of Russia is suicide. To trust Russia is suicide. It's time to put an end to that terrorist regime, to all of their cronies, and their fanboys and fangirls abroad. You know, my friends, I'll switch the topic just a little bit, but I'm sure you'll enjoy this topic. The ones who know this person will enjoy it. I'm sure you've all heard of an individual called Andrew Tate. I'm sure you've heard about his disgusting views on the rest of the world. But he has a big fan base still, although he's been scanning his fanboys over and over and over again. Andrew Tate is one of the people who has been vehemently supporting Russia. No surprises there. He's been vehemently bragging about sexually exploiting women and about sexually exploiting minors. So that should give you some food for thought. And now, after a whole bunch of cryptocurrency scams, after a whole bunch of pyramid schemes and pump and dumps, now he still has some fans, some people who trust him. This is not dissimilar from Russia, my friends. Some people are so fanatical about their support of disgusting entities like the Russian terrorist regime.
Так, стоп, а чому балакаєте на українську?
Only an old Ukrainian proverb truly applies to them. Only the grave will face you. That is what we can apply to these people. They cannot be fixed, my friend. They cannot be reasoned with. I remember a while ago we spoke with a friend of ours. And he was saying that we need to reason with the Russians. We need to reason with their supporters, with the supporters of Putin. My friends, we do our counter-protests not to reason with the sea zombies. No, they are beyond reason. They've lost that reason. They forfeited it long ago. We are doing it for the people who do not know, for the people on the sidelines who are looking at these two groups of people arguing with each other vehemently, are not sure which of them has any reason to be there, which of them is correct. That is why we do it, my friends. That is why it's so important to face our opposition head on. So that the people who do not know any better, so that the people who feel like they are neutral in this situation, in this confrontation between the Russian terrorist regime and the free world, so that they know, that they might think that they are neutral. But Russia is most certainly not neutral to them. And it will never be neutral to them until they become their slaves. That is the only way of siding with Russia. Self-enslavement. These useful idiots who we spoke with on 9th of May, who came with communist flags and a picture of Stalin to top it all off, they did not realize what they were doing, my friends. They did not truly comprehend how hypocritical of them it is in this free country to be coming out to the streets and supporting an authoritarian genocidal regime. They did not realize how fortunate they are that this country here is free. That this is a free place, a free country we live in. And there are values upheld here, British values. Values that are giving people a good quality of life. Values that are allowing people to speak freely, unafraid of immediate consequences to their lives and livelihoods. But they do not understand that, my friends. They feel like their ability of freedom of speech is good enough for them to be supporting genocidal regimes, to be supporting those who want that freedom of speech to end. How unfortunate. They do not comprehend the gift that has been bestowed upon them. A poor use for the legacy of this great country. But alas, we need to remember. We need to remember the sacrifices done in the past to achieve this country, to achieve these great values, to achieve the present. When we know that, we will achieve a better future. All together, we will win.
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 World, wake up.
World, wake up. world, wake up!
Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 More sanctions on Russia.
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 Seize Russian assets.
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 No trade with Russia.
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 Now, my friends, sometimes the Russian propaganda machine likes to mock the acts of the free world that they have performed to oppose the Russian terrorist regime. For example, the appeal to imprison Putin if he sets feet into one of the countries that is in close cooperation with the West. They mock it and they say, oh, you know, Putin can still go around the world. Not true. He cannot go wherever he pleases. That's a huge hit against his pride, against the Russian pride also. That, my friends, is something very important. That is something that should not be underestimated by any circumstances. That is what we need to continue doing in order to make sure that the Russian terrorist regime loses, and loses hard, suffers a crushing defeat in Ukraine. That should be the aim of every person who wants to be free. For as we all know, the only thing it takes for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. That's why it's so important that we all do something, that we all try our best to tell the world what's going on and to inform those who are unaware about this great catastrophe, this great crime against humanity that the Russian terrorist regime has been perpetrated against the Ukrainian people. The nation that has sacrificed the most to achieve world peace out of any other nation on this planet. The nation that has laid low the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world in order to achieve world peace. The nation that has trusted the international community and yet has been countless times betrayed by that same international community. That, my friends, is something worth remembering. And that is why that is something worth speaking about. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Slava naciji!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава, слава, слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть, смерть, смерть!
Now, my friends, we will have another, no short musical break, no? Perhaps, yeah, we will have one.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Good evening, everyone. I'll help Pablo a little bit because he was doing his brilliant solo. I'm Vitas and I'm in London and Lithuanian, and I would like to speak about one important theme which we mention from time to time, and it's about what Europe and supporters of Ukraine could do on the issue of demining Ukraine, because right now, according to the data by the United Nations, by the European Union, Ukraine is the most mined country in the world. And actually there is analysis of the cost of it. The human cost is huge. Civilians who have died in Ukraine because of stepping on the mines, and the military, of course, is over 360 people who lost their lives. And the injured, heavily injured people are coming to 800 people. So it's a big problem for the families who lost their loved ones, or those who are made forever. But it's also a huge financial problem for Ukraine. Ukraine, an agricultural sector of Ukraine is the is a breadbasket of Europe, and there was a calculation by a UK think tank, actually it's called Tony Blair Institute, that each year Ukraine loses around 11.2 billion euros in its GDP because of the territories which are mined, and the agriculture sector just cannot operate there, can do nothing there. So it's a big problem which is affecting Ukraine financially, and that's where the international cooperation can do more and is doing something. So on that issue of demining, there are two countries, and they're small countries, but they are serious about it. So one is Lithuania, my own country, and another is Iceland, and they're cooperating on making an international alliances of what practical demining equipment Ukraine needs, what sort of training people in Ukraine should be getting, how to spot the mines, how to demine, how should it be done in a safe manner. So of course it has to be heavy equipment, which is very expensive, which is specially adapted for that, both for the military and for the civilian use. And that equipment will be needed in big quantities. There are two parts of this problem. One is immediate, how to help Ukrainian, the militaries to demine those zones which they need to be demined so that they can defend better or they can counterattack. Another, of course, is with civilians, with the people who are working on that, who are using their tractors and other equipment to basically to get the crops and to export it and gain the valuable dollars or euros for Ukrainian GDP. So there are two problems. One is immediate, another is longer term, and things are being done. So just this week, I think it was 2 days ago in Monday, in Kiev, there was a big international donor event, and Iceland and Lithuania presented already the trucks which are already in Ukraine, the other specific equipment for demining, and it's actually could be during this period quite a big employer, the international community, the European Union, and each donor countries of people, because of course joblessness is a big problem right now in Ukraine, and some of the people who could be trained and be the deminers, it's also a source of income. There is a way to do it safely, and on demining, UK is very important as well. There are a couple of big organizations. One of them is Hello Trust. It's a big demining charity which has been involved in demining Bosnia or demining places in Africa after the conflict. So they have a lot of know-how. Actually, they are active in Ukraine already, and they have connections with these people in the MOD. Many of Halo Trust leaders are ex-MOD, ex-British officers, so they know a thing or two about how to dispose of those mines and how to do it. And one of the things I've read that actually they say that women in each country, so be it in Bosnia or be it somewhere else, and in Ukraine as well, women are much better deminers than men because they are much more cautious. They really follow the sort of instructions of what to do. They don't cut like let's do it fast things. They really do it by the book, and they are sort of better at this job than men. So it's of course, in an ideal situation we would like to be zero mines in Ukraine, but we know now that for every thousands of mines which are laid in the territory of sovereign Ukraine, it will take maybe a couple of days to put them. It will take 10 times longer to find them and demine and safely dispose it. So international community must do more and can do more. This is a very, very practical way of helping Ukraine, because I want to say it again, Ukraine is losing more than 11 billion euros a year because it cannot use the land, which otherwise would be the land for the crops, because of this mining thing. So, and of course another bit is, in many, many ways, but mines are laid by Russians, and they do it breaking the international conventions, breaking the international laws. That is a war crime, and that is well documented by the organizations which are demining. So ultimately, when Russia and its leaders will be in the international tribunal, the mining, this illegal mining, putting those mines in a deliberate way to hurt the civilians, that is a war crime, and that Russia should be responsible for that crime. So I would like for us to chant, Tribunal for Russian war criminals.
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 All right, and just a final bit, very briefly, I want to say, and I've repeated it a couple of times, but that's important. There is a plan, long-term plan, of how to help Ukraine, even in the worst case scenarios, when some important countries like US might get cold feet or will not want to commit as much of the resources or the military gear for Ukraine. And that plan was developed by a leader of a small country of Estonia, when she was a prime minister, Kaja Kallas. Right now, very soon, she will be the head of European Union diplomacy service. So she's one of the top 3 people in the European Union. So Kallas and her government has worked out what money Ukraine needs to be able to sort of have its economy floating and surviving well, and also for the military, and that's only 0.25% of the GDP of each country which is supporting Ukraine. So we have a coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, starting with Japan and Australia and ending with Canada, and of course the European countries. So if each of these nations committed only 0.25% of its GDP, that will be enough for Ukraine to have its economy going well during this war period, and to have enough funds to purchase the military gear it needs. And a lot of countries, smaller countries, like Estonia or Lithuania or some other ones, have made this commitment. So I think this is a commitment big European nations like UK, like Germany should make. It's really not a lot for these countries, not a lot of money for these countries, but that commitment will secure Ukraine's long-term future. Thank you very much indeed. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава, слава, слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть, смерть, смерть!
My friends, a quick announcement on 19th of December, I believe, right? Mikhail, 19th December, yeah? Cool. 19th November, I'm sorry, I have to double check to see so I don't give wrong information to people. 19th of November, so this month, 19th, we're going to do an event for the 1000th day of this war. Obviously, my friends, it's no celebration. It's more of a mourning event, where we will mourn the continuation of this senseless war that the Russian terrorist regime has started and escalated, that will only end when they are beaten. We will do our event here, I believe, what time, Mikhail, will you teach us? 6 o'clock. So we're going to have our rally here, except it's not going to be on a Wednesday, it's going to be on a Tuesday. On 16th, this month.
said 7.
Wait, 19. You see, this is the problem. I'm already jumbling the numbers. This is the problem. This is the problem when you don't have a useful piece of paper or information that you look at. 19, I'm sorry guys. Now for certain. 19 this month here at 6. Alright? Got it straight this time. Друзі, я вже тут напоминявся 10 разів, ну зате люди посміялися, це головне. Зате люди трішки посміялися.
Наша опозиція теж робить.
Наша опозиція теж щось буде робити?
Наша опозиція.
Russian opposition, yeah. The Russian Democrats are also going to do an event on the same day, which I think we should appreciate. We should always appreciate the support from anyone, all over the world. And you know what? The Russians are no exception to that. They need to support our cause. If they supported it more, if the Russian population as a whole supported it, this war would have never happened. But alas, my friends, reality is that the Russian government has a very tight grip on the proverbial throats of your average Russian. Not only that, but this is something I've been speaking about very often. The Russian culture itself has a terrible rot to it. They are very much leaning towards authoritarian regimes. That is why Russia has basically always been an authoritarian regime. But that will have to change. Just like there was a denazification of Nazi Germany, there will be a deputinization of Russia. That will happen for certain. And it will happen with the help of people from all over the world. It will certainly happen, my friends. Many times in the past, Russia and the Soviet Union have invaded Ukraine, have abused the Ukrainian people, have crushed the Ukrainian desire for freedom. However, this time, the world can see what's going on. The Ukrainian heroes died in the dark back then, without being seen by the world. Only now people are starting to notice what has happened to those brave people in the past. But their memory will not be allowed to be lost. And their path will be continued by every single person who knows and who wants to change the future for better. So their sacrifice will always have a meaning, my friends, as long as we achieve what needs to be done in the future. Then their sacrifice will finally have those results that they always intended to have. Now, the world needs to see the crimes of the Russian terrorist regime. And the world needs to also see that the solution to this problem, the solution to this pustule, this seeping pustule in Eastern Europe and Northern Asia called Russia, is unity. Unity and strength of the free world, of every person who wants a better future, of every person who wants to live as a human being and not as a slave, not as a piece of meat served on a skewer by the Russian terrorist regime. That is the choice we have, my friends, and that is the choice we should all make, unequivocally, and to clearly show the world that all together we truly will win, because that is the only choice for the Ukrainian people to survive. When the Russian terrorist regime invaded Ukraine, the choice they gave the Ukrainian people was not peace or war. The choice they gave the Ukrainian people was war or extermination. Simple as that. And of course, these fools who understand nothing about the relations between Ukraine and Russia, they will always say, oh, it's the Nazis, it's all of these evil Ukrainians who just wanted to abuse the poor, innocent, prosecuted Russian people. But my friends, the truth of the matter is that there is a Nazi problem in Ukraine, yes. There's 3 Nazi battalions. The Sparta battalion, the Wagner group, and the Rusich, every single one of them sent by Russia. Every single one of them aiming to kill as many Ukrainians as possible. So when Putin says that there is a Nazi problem in Ukraine, in a way he is correct. He has caused the Nazi problem in Ukraine. He has sent Nazis to Ukraine to kill the Ukrainian people. And then Putin, the self-proclaimed denazifier, continuously shills for the Soviet Union of all things. The Soviet Union that started World War II on the same side as the Nazis. The Soviet Union that as the Nazis were invading Poland from the west, were at the same exact time invading Poland from the east. The Soviet Union that made a treaty with Nazi Germany to split Poland, to split Eastern Europe. In the Molotov-Ribbentrop Treaty. If people want proof, we give them proof. If people want evidence, we give them evidence. If people want the names of the treaties, we will give them those names so that they can look them up themselves, so that they can check out whether or not we're telling the truth. We're hiding nothing, my friends. We are here telling people what's truly going on and how we can all stop this war for good. It is those who deny our ability to speak who are hiding things. Many times we have engaged head-on with our opposition, with the supporters of the Russian terrorist regime. Sometimes we were joined by our Iranian friends. Sometimes we were joined by people from other countries. Sometimes we were joined by other Russians. But the truth of the matter is, my friends, our enemy has its tendrils spread all over the world. They managed to garner even a little bit of support from every country. Sure, Ukraine is a far more popular, far more accepted cause to defend. However, there is this very bad trend of opposing the mainstream. Oh, you know, I'm against the mainstream. I'm a unique person, you see. The mainstream always lies. What an idiotic thing to say that is, my friends. You run the risk of leading yourself into a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories if you believe in that. As the saying goes, if you can never agree with your enemy, then you're being controlled by him. Sure. Once every blue moon, even the Russian terrorist regime says things that are true. You see, when Prigozhin was speaking, the late Prigozhin in fact, was speaking about the way the Russian terrorist regime's military works, he was telling the truth. When he was speaking about the real reasons why this war was started, he was telling the truth. When he was saying that your average Russian has nothing to gain with this war, it's only the Russian elites who have something to gain with it, he was telling the truth. That's exactly why he got killed. Prigozhin was a war criminal. However, he was a war criminal with a point. He was a war criminal who was showing the reality of the rot of the Russian terrorist regime. That's exactly why the Russian terrorist regime put down this dog that bit the hand that used to feed him. That is why the Russian terrorist regime tightened the leash until he choked to death. But I don't want to mislead people. He was not choked to death. We all know the way Prigozhin went out of this world by leaping out of the tallest window on earth, being knocked down from the plane that he was flying between Moscow and Novgorod, I believe. What an interesting place to be put down. You could almost expect the Russians to try to blame the Ukrainians for that. Right, the Ukrainian air defense system knocking down Prigozhin on top of Moscow. That would be the day. That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? You could say that the Ukrainians have the best air defense system in the world if that happened. But the Russians did not try to push for that. You see, in fact, the Russians no longer speak about Prigozhin. There was a time when he was all over the news. There was a time when the average Russian would worship Prigozhin. Why? Because he was a self-proclaimed patriot. Because he was leading the biggest neo-Nazi battalion in the world. the Wagner Group. And your average Putin supporter loves Russian Nazis.
Сейчас упадет.
You see, that's the funny part. How come they claim to be so much against Nazis, and yet they have Nazis fighting for themselves? Well, it's very simple. They see them as the good Nazis, because they fight on their side. That's the funny part. My friends, everybody in this world needs to realize what kind of a filthy beast the Russian terrorist regime is. What kind of a rotten posture on this earth it is. And what kind of measures need to be taken to be removing this posture at long last, before this sickness spreads to the rest of the world. It has already spread to eastern Ukraine. What's next?
Он ему что-то сказал?
Is the Russian terrorist regime going to perhaps decide that Georgia is ripe for the taking? And they're going to attack it with the troops they already have in Georgia, illegally occupying Georgian lands in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Perhaps they will attack Moldova with the troops they have in Transnistria. As now Moldova has made its intentions clear to join Europe, to join the free world, Russia can't have that. Russia can't have people being free, people making their own decisions. No. That goes against their rich culture of enslavement. I jest, of course, my friends. It's nothing rich. A culture of slaves is not a rich culture. It's a rotten posture. And my friends, of course, we need to always remember that the Russian terrorist regime continues to throw mud at the wall and hope that some of it sticks. They will continuously try to poke holes in the truth, poke holes in the narrative of the people who support Ukraine. But we must know better. You know, the riots that happened here in the United Kingdom, they were based on a lie. The man who had killed those girls was not even Muslim.
Какой-то не русский,
And yet, it was the pro-Russian people, one of the main spreaders of misinformation in that regard. Did it directly benefit them? No. But at the same time it did. Because every single time something destabilizes the United Kingdom, every single time something hurts this country or any country in the free world, Russia wins. Russia gains something with every single thing that we lose. How much simpler can this choice be for every person? How much more clear that decision needs to be? The decision to finally bring down the Russian terrorist regime as the enemy of the free world, as the enemy of the free people. That's it's our message. And that is the message we always send when we come here to 10 Downing Street. We hope that people will hear it. If not everyone, then some. We hope that those who hear it will appropriate it. If not everyone, then some. However,
Пустите стариков.
we are doing what we can by them.
Накиньте ему народ.
And every person should do what they can. Every person should join us and add their voice to ours in our rallies here at 10 Downing Street. Our rallies happen here on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock, on Fridays at 6 o'clock, and on Sundays at 3 o'clock. You can see the schedule on our Instagram page called Support Ukraine.London. So please come and show your support. It's unbelievably important that you do. And I'd like to at last, finalize this rally by thanking all the people who came
Я
here,
просто прочь сидел в
all the people who come here on a regular basis above all. You, my friends, have made this possible. You have enabled all of us to make our words be heard by the rest of the world. For that, we say to you, thank you. And I'd also like to thank the people who might not come here every single time, but come here whenever they have the time to do as such.
Я слышу русский.
There is no judgment against you, my friends. Come as many times as you can. We will always be grateful for it. And now, my friends, we're going to end this rally as we started with the Ukrainian anthem.
Як роса на сонці, запанує ними, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду.
Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
Дякую.
Так, як сказав. Добре. Що ви бачите?
Так що ти підеш?
Віталій.